He noticed it first from the bedroom window while lacing his boots for the early train. Fat, lazy flakes drifting past the street lamp like they had nowhere better to be. By the time he kissed the girls goodbye, Sophia still half buried in her giraffe, Olivia already plotting breakfast negotiations. The garden had vanished under a thin white quilt. He stood on the porch a moment longer than necessary, breathing in the cold that tasted of pine and chimney smoke, and felt something loosen in his chest he hadn't realized was knotted. 2 years ago, snow had meant something else entirely. 2 years ago, snow had meant the night the roads turned treacherous, and the call came at 2:17 a.m., and the world folded in half. He pushed the memory down the way you push a drawer closed with your hip when your hands are full, and went to work. Across town, she woke to the hush that only deep snow brings. The house felt different under it, muffled, gentler. She lay listening to the radiators clank their familiar morning song, and realized she had not cried upon waking. Not once in the last 11 days. The realization frightened her more than tears ever had. She rose anyway, pulled on the thick socks Olivia insisted were grandma socks but secretly cool. Went downstairs and started coffee before the girls thundered down demanding pancakes shaped like unicorns, Sophia, or dinosaurs, Olivia, who claimed unicorns were basic. The kitchen smelled of yeast and vanilla. She mixed batter with the radio low, some French accordion thing she'd found months ago when insomnia was still winning. She had begun leaving the radio on at night, volume barely audible, because silence had teeth. Sophia appeared first, hair exploding in every direction, giraffe tucked under one arm like a bodyguard. "Mama," she said solemnly, "it snowed. That means the world is new." Olivia followed, already bargaining. "If the world is new, does that mean we don't have to go to school? New worlds probably don't have multiplication tables." She laughed before she could stop herself. The sound startled all three of them. It had been scarce currency for so long. "Nice try," she told Olivia. "But even new worlds have math." Pancakes, however, are universal. They ate at the table that still had one empty chair no one mentioned. The girls argued over who got the last dinosaur ear. Snow pressed against the windows like it wanted in on the warmth. When the school bus honked, they kissed her cheeks sticky with syrup and ran out shouting promises to build a snow octopus at recess. The door shut. The house exhaled. She stood in the sudden quiet with a dish towel in her hands and felt the old panic rise, the one that whispered, "Now you are alone with it again." But the panic was thinner these days, like a ghost that had started forgetting why it haunted. She hung the towel, went to the living room, and uncovered the easel. The canvas waiting there was small, only 12 by 16, but it terrified her more than the 6-foot ones she used to attack with house paint and fury. Small canvases forgave nothing. Every brushstroke showed. She had not painted since the accident. Had not been able to. The brushes dried stiff, the oils separated into sad layered rainbows in their tubes. Her agent stopped calling. Friends learned not to ask. Then last week Sophia had tugged her sleeve in the craft store and begged for real artist paints, the kind that smell like Christmas trees. Olivia had added, "We'll share, Mama. Promise. We just want to make you happy." So she bought 3 tubes, cerulean, cadmium yellow, burnt umber, and a handful of brushes because the girls' eyes were wide as moons. She told herself it was for them. That night, after they were asleep, she had uncapped the cerulean and the smell punched her so hard she sat on the studio floor and cried for an hour. Then she wiped her face, squeezed a worm of blue onto the palette that still had Elena's tiny thumbprint dried in one corner, and made a single stripe across the canvas. Just one. Then another. Then a furious swirl of gold, because the blue looked cold and lonely. She painted until 3 a.m., terrified and exhilarated, the way you feel when you realize the broken bone has knit stronger than before. Now, in the snow-muffled morning, she faced the canvas again. The swirl from that night had dried into something that looked almost like hope if you squinted. She picked up a brush. Hours vanished. Snow kept falling. The radio cycled through chansons she half understood. At some point she became aware of cold feet and looked down to see she was barefoot, socks abandoned somewhere under the table. Paint ringed her fingernails like exotic bruises. The painting was becoming winter sky fractured by late sun, the exact color of the light that slanted through the icicles outside the window. It hurt to look at in the best way. She did not hear the front door open. He stood in the doorway longer than he meant to, coat dripping on the mat, watching her the way you watch a deer that doesn't yet know you're there. She was thinner than she'd been before everything, but the angles had softened. Grief no longer looked sharp enough to cut. Her hair was twisted up with a paintbrush speared through it like a samurai knot. There was a streak of gold across one cheekbone. He felt the same lurch he'd felt the first time he saw her, 28 years old, laughing at her own canvas in a university hallway because she'd accidentally painted a nude model with 6 fingers. She sensed him then and turned, startled, brush raised like a weapon. "You're early," she said, breathless. Train was canceled. Too much snow. He stepped out of his shoes. "Didn't want to call and wake you if you were sleeping." She gave a small laugh that meant I haven't slept past 6 in 2 years. He crossed the room slowly, afraid to spook whatever fragile thing was happening. When he reached the easel, he stopped. The painting hit him like a slap of color and memory. Elena had loved winter light. She used to stand on chairs to catch it on her face and declare herself a snow princess. The canvas held that exact gold. He couldn't speak. She watched his face. Terrified, she'd done something unforgivable by painting joy. "It's all right if you hate it," she whispered. He shook his head. Found his voice. It's her favorite color." She bit her lip, so hard it went white. He reached out, not quite touching the canvas, fingers hovering over the thickest ridge of gold. "She would have tried to eat this paint," he said, and the laugh that came out of him sounded rusty but real. They stood there until the radiator clanked and reminded them the world still moved. Eventually he said, "I brought something," and pulled a paper bag from his coat pocket. Inside was a tiny jar of gold leaf flakes he'd found at the art supply near his office on impulse during lunch. He hadn't known why he bought it until this moment. Her eyes filled. "Too much?" he asked. She shook her head, took the jar with trembling fingers, unscrewed the lid. The flakes caught the light like trapped sunlight. Together they laid a careful constellation of gold across the top third of the canvas, pressing it down with the pads of their ring fingers the way she used to let Elena do when she was 3 and sticky with jam. The metal adhered in delicate, imperfect stars. When it was done, she stepped back and looked at him, really looked for the first time in months. "You kept the brushes," he said quietly. He'd noticed the old sable ones cleaned and lined up like soldiers on the tray. "I found your note," she admitted. He frowned, confused. "Last year. When I couldn't, when everything was impossible. You cleaned them one night after I fell asleep on the couch. Left a note that said, 'For when you're ready.'" "Norus." He rubbed the back of his neck, embarrassed. "I didn't think you saw." "I didn't. Not then. I found it last week when I opened the drawer, and everything smelled like turpentine again instead of dust." They were quiet so long the snow seemed loud. Then she said, "I'm scared, Rowan." "I know. If I let myself be happy, it feels like I'm leaving her behind." He took her paint-cold hands. "She's in the gold, Elodie. She's in the ridiculous unicorn pancakes and Sophia's obsession with giraffes and Olivia's terrible knock-knock jokes. She's not going anywhere. We get to keep living." That's what she would demand, you know. Full volume. Always. A tear slipped down her cheek and left a clean streak through the gold paint. He brushed it away with his thumb, same as he'd done in the kitchen in her mind 1,000 times when she rehearsed this conversation that never quite happened. "I miss her every second," he said. "But I miss you too. And you're right here." She leaned her forehead against his chest. His coat was still cold from outside. She could smell snow on the wool. "I painted today," she mumbled into his shirt. "I see that. I'm going to paint tomorrow too. And maybe the day after." He kissed the top of her head, lips lingering against a paintbrush still stuck in her hair. "Good." They stayed like that until the school bus dropped the girls home early because of the weather. The front door burst open, admitting a whirlwind of boots and laughter and accusations of snowball betrayal. Sophia ran straight to the canvas and gasped theatrically.
Mama.
You put stars in the sky. Olivia, ever practical, asked, Can we have hot chocolate with the tiny marshmallows? The snow deserves it. She looked at Rowan over their heads. He was smiling the way he used to, crooked, helpless, utterly in love with all three of them. Yes, she said. The snow deserves it. That night the power flickered, but held. They pushed the couch closer to the fireplace and ate spaghetti off paper plates because the dishwasher was full of paintbrushes soaking. The girls fell asleep mid-movie, Sophia's head in her lap, Olivia sprawled across Rowan's chest like a starfish. When he carried them to bed, she added another layer of gold to the canvas by firelight, thicker this time, reckless. She painted until the house was quiet again and the snow finally stopped. He found her asleep on the studio floor, cheek against the drop cloth, one hand still curled protectively around the jar of gold leaf. He lifted her carefully, she weighed nothing these days, and carried her to bed. She stirred only enough to murmur, Don't clean the brushes tonight. I won't, he promised. In the dark, he could just make out the canvas glowing faintly where the firelight reached it through the open door. It looked like the sky had cracked open and spilled treasure. Tomorrow, he thought, he would call the office and take a personal day. And the day after that. However many it took. Outside, the world was new, exactly as Sophia had declared. Inside, a family of 4, 3 visible, one shimmering in every glint of gold, began, carefully, to remember how to live out loud. The snow held everything gently, the way grief eventually does when it decides to become love again.